This is the first book event of the year. We are pleased to have Mr. Gopal Gandhi here, and I am also really grateful to Sashi for his role to moderate this session. To have Gandhi's writing today has an enormous relevance. At some level, the extraordinary simplicity through which he actually cut the clutters what you are facing today is so important. As a journalist, actually, I gained immensely from both of them. While initially I've been trying to look at the importance of your and the rigor of your content, both of them also brought in an element of elegance to their articulation. Therefore, elegant articulation along with intrinsic content is the one which makes the writing so important. I'm really thankful to have both of them here. This is our 23rd event. We started the reading hub with my colleague Sundar doing a evaluation of Balakrishna's Journey of Civilization. That was followed by Amartya Sen's autobiography, Home in the World. It was followed by Rukmini's book on data journalism. Then Suchita Vijayan's Midnight Borders. Then there was a book on Tamil migrants. We had a book on No Man's Land on NRCCAA. We had a book on Periyar by Karthik Ram Manogaran. We had Peggy Morgan's book on Wanderers, Kings and Merchants. We had an interesting book on the status of Indian media by Ruben Banerjee called Editor Missing. Comrades and Mullahs was a book on Afghanistan and China. Politics for Sustainable Growth of Tamil Nadu was an interaction with Eric Solheim. Then there was a discussion on Jayarunjan's Rebellion Journey. South versus North by Neelagan K.S. Rajaraja Cholan by Kamini Dandapani. Speaking Constitution by Kalpana Kanabran, which was a translation of her father's autobiography. The Book of Desire was a translation of Thirukural's Kamathupal by Meena Kandasamy. We had a discussion on Crooked Timber of New India by Dr. Parkala Prabhakar, and we had an excellent discussion on Roses in the Fire of Spring by M.S. Veeraraghavan and Girija Veeraraghavan last year. This year we are starting with this book on Mahatma Gandhi. Thank you, Sashi. Thank you, sir. Over to you.
Well, for me, it's a distinct.
Before we start, we would like to give a small token of appreciation of the letter.
Thank you.
May I request my colleague Sundar to hand over. This is a copy of first edition of Thirukural, entered in 1820, which is very, very precious. And Sashi would like to have a copy of the
Get the dancing girl.
dancing on the voice. Thanks. Thank you.
It's fine. So before we came to this hall, when we were sitting outside, Gopal was saying that we're looking at a replica of the dancing girl on Mr. Sundar's desk. And he was saying, whoever called it dancing girl, why do we assume it's a dancing girl? And it's true when you say that, because, and he said that she certainly looks like a girl who no one can mess with. And so it's I think that's indicative of a fresh look at things. I mean, Gandhi is known for us. Gandhi is canon for us. Gandhi is father of the nation. Gandhi is part of the national psyche, if you like, is part of the Indian psyche. And therefore, to do a book on Gandhi, even for his grandson, must be a formidable task. And so when I was asked to engage with Gopalakrishna Gandhi, the first thought I had was, What new can he tell us about Gandhi? Because not that I've read, we have the collected works of Mahatma Gandhi, for instance, at a college in Asian College of Journalism, entire two shelves. But seriously, one doesn't read all of that. One has read different excerpts and so on. And so I just want to, as a kind of prelude, say that I started reading the book and found some days back, many days back, and it was so riveting that I read it day after day, and as I planned, finished reading it this morning. It's a fascinating, riveting read. Uh, Much of it, of course, is what Gandhi is saying, but the introductions that Gopal gives them, each of those, it's arranged, as in four parts. The first part is less than a decade. The rest of it are in decades, and the last part is also shortened because Gandhi is assassinated in 1948, as we know. But the introductions he gives, and since we are just out of a music season, where if you went for a dance performance and they're performing an entire story of a mythology which we know or may not know, the introductory statement by the performer will set the context. So you understand what's happening in some detail. And Gopal says, the introductions that he gives are so pithy and so useful in framing what is going to happen the next decade that he excerpts from Gandhi himself that makes for the kind of engaging reading that this book, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, I Am an Ordinary Man, that's the subtitle, is all about. I'm going to engage with Gopal about everything, including the title, but before that, what I would suggest, I request him to do is to give you a sense of the meteor, the tone and tenor of the book, as well as the measure of the man whom we call Mahatma. But he chooses to quote him as I am an ordinary man. I'd request Gopal perhaps to begin by uh, giving us in his own voice the words of Mahatma Gandhi, of Gandhiji, some of the representative excerpts that will give you a sense of the volume, as well as, of course, a relook, a reinvented, a reimagined, I think, which is very relevant for our times, look at what Gandhi is. I say this because, these days, if you are looking at social media, you will not be surprised, as many of you indeed might have gone through this exercise. They do these spot polls. I saw the other day someone in Kerala, which is supposed to be 100% literate, in asking students or youth in the millennial generation, have you heard of Jawaharlal Nehru? The sampling. And you'll be surprised after the number of people who don't. They have not heard of Jawaharlal Nehru. They think, they show them a picture. In fact, they don't say, have you heard of Jawaharlal? They say this picture and say, do you know who this is? So they show Nehru's picture instead. And they say, somebody said, this is a Shah Rukh Khan who acted in some film. Is it someone? So it's incredible, but just, you check this out. And so, of course, this happened with Gandhi because his image is ubiquitous, partly because of it's also part of the currency and so on. So we are in times where we need to replenish our ideas about what we take for granted, revisit some of our icons, our national icons. And I'm so very happy that Gopal has written this book. And from what I hear, the book is doing wonderfully well. It's been receiving, it's created a frisson, I know, in the book festival circles, from what I track, what friends tell me. I'm so happy for the book and for the author. So I begin, as I said, by requesting Gopal to share us excerpts of the book he would choose, just to give us an overall idea about the book.
Thank you very much, Sashi. I'd like to just start by thanking DPF and thanking Panir for arranging this afternoon's get-together. Gandhi was very uncomfortable talking about himself. He was like any person who starts writing his own life, his own autobiography, serious about what he had started. But for some reason which is completely unclear to me, and says what he says, being completely understandable by me. He says, refused to proceed further. In 1924, he just stops writing. 1924 is when he stops writing the autobiography. And I can't, for the life of me, understand why he did so. It's one of those things which you will never find an answer to. And so, to find autobiographical observations by him about his own life outside the autobiography becomes important. What he says about his wife, his children, his colleagues, his struggles, internal and political, outside his autobiography becomes important for anyone who wants to hear what he has to say in his own words about himself. Letters and stray references to his life in his articles, which appeared in Young India and Harijan, were about the only source available. I've also used in this compilation, which is the second volume, the first ending in 1914 when he leaves South Africa. I've also used first person accounts by his colleagues, which appeared in his lifetime or immediately after, from their diaries which were written in his lifetime. So there are some passages, especially towards the end, when I have drawn on parallel, for instance, his secretary has written, and have put it in the first person, a liberty that I have explained in the introduction. Now, since Sashi is here, I can't help saying this. There are many recordings of Sashi's talks and dialogues and interviews. There is one which has gripped me and which I have used extensively in my classes. And that's a very small little video in which Sashi is sitting on a chair and is talking about the Tamil Ayyo. And he says, Ayyo can be said in 100 ways. And I have no histrionic and thespian talent, so I won't even try it. But in that video, which I would request all of you to see, he says, Ayyo, one word which can be in many ways Tamil word, used to express a myriad experiences, reactions. He wrote, Ayyo, in a myriad ways. When he was first heard of in India, it was Ayyo. South Africa. And then as he got into the Ayyo, and then maybe just one more example towards the end. Ayyo. So all those Ayyos being the response to his life can be imagined from what he says about himself. He and his wife, who is a remarkable figure and who I would like to dwell on a little in a few minutes, were in the struggle together. In the last great struggle in South Africa, when he was planning the satyagraha, triggered by many things, particularly in recognition of the recognition of marriages that were not registered or had not been performed according to the Christian mode. A satyagraha with women participating and the great Vaishnava participating started. But before that, Kasturba said, I have gathered that some women are participating in this. I also want to, I intend to participate. So he said, you want to participate? I was sure you want to. She said, of course I'm sure I want to participate. Look, you are my wife. If when you are jailed, when you are arrested, you weaken, it would be wife who is weakening. She said, she must have said it in very expressive Gujarati. Don't keep thinking about yourself. I want to join the satyagraha. I believe in the satyagraha being the right. I am going to jail. He said, of course you should. She was given hard labor for 3 months, and hard labor meant hard labor, not real work. She and Valyama both. Valyama didn't survive. So she comes out completely shattered, but she comes out heroic. And then when they're leaving South Africa after the great agreement with General Smuts, they go to London on their way back to India to meet Gokhale, and then they get stuck there. When they reach London, an extraordinary thing happens which is not so well known. There were some Indians there in London, and they organized a meeting at which, would you believe, the following were present: M.A. Jinnah, Sarojini Naidu, Lala Lajpat Rai, Congress President Bhupendranath Bose, and incredibly, Anand K. Kumaraswamy, the state, they were the audience. Gandhi and Kasturba together are felicitated. And Gandhi says, standing before that gathering, I said, we have got the limelight in South Africa, we including the wife. But if we maintain approbation, how much more went into the struggle was never thought of appreciation. Harbat Singh was 75 years in the struggle and entered prison and died there. A young lad, Narayana Swami, was deported to Madras and in his return starved and died. Another Tamil Nadipan was imprisoned and worked on the African meat in the bitter cold of winter and died. And then the and was discharged only when she took venom and died shortly thereafter. So just observe this. 20,000 workers, 20,000 workers, mostly Tamil and Telugu, had left their jobs and work and went in faith. Violence was entirely eschewed. And then comes this nugget of a sentence, which is on these women who are the salt of the earth, that the Indian nation that is to be will be built. I said at that lecture, we are said are matters before these laws and healings. So this was his sense of his own role and Kasturba's. And this was his sense of what 20,000 workers down on their toes, Tamil, Telugu, or some from Bihar, plantation workers. It is their sacrifice which he describes that ended in that very successful though partial agreement and led on to what happened in India. Since I am a bit taken by sorry, I didn't intend to say my grandmother, I meant Kasturba. I must say that he refers to her as Kastur. And it's very interesting. In the British Library, a document exists which was recently found, the only one in which M.K. Gandhi and Kastur have signed together. Kastur has signed it in Gujarati, in the Gujarati script. And he has written below that Mrs. M.K. Gandhi. So Kastur and M.K., both Gandhis, came to India via South Africa, transferring the credit of that Satyagraha success wholly to 20,000 workers of Indian origin, not keeping anything of it themselves. And he knows how he was really deceived here. Before the world, before he came to Madras on his return from South Africa, was his visit to Bihar for the plantations. And there is something which we don't know. This is what makes a volume like this. There's some interest was what he saw in Bihar in terms of what was happening to the indigo workers. He had heard from an individual called Shukla the condition of the indigo workers and wanted to go and see them themselves. And there is this Hindi film song, Sajan re jhoot mat bolo, don't bluff. न हाथी है न घोड़ा है. There is no elephant there. There is no horse there. सजन ये झूठ मत बोलो. Thank you, Superman. न हाथी है न घोड़ा है. वहां पैदल ही जाना है. Don't bluff. No elephants there. Horses. You have to go on your foot. There meaning God's heaven. So here, he was telling the British, don't you bluff. And he went on elephant back. They were also an elephant. Nine in the morning, an elephant back for Jaswali Patti, for carrying on the inquiry. Rajendra Prasad. Neither Rajendra Prasad nor he knew that Rajendra Prasad would one day be in that office for 12 years. He says some 9 miles down on the elephant track. When I was at a village called Chandeliya, a policeman riding a bicycle caught up with me and said the collector wanted to see me. I'm so happy that my colleague Purnalingam is here, who's been a collector. He knew exactly what the collector is. Huge power. Even today. Collector wanted to see me. I asked him to arrange for a visit. As my colleagues would get me the German or elephant, I would go to see the collector. A bullock cart was produced to me, from elephant to bullock cart. And later a horse-drawn cart to take me to Motihari. On the way, notice was served me under section 144 of the CRPC to say I was not to proceed to Champaran and instead leave the district by the next available train. He, of course, refused to do so. The great Satyagraha in Bihar on indigos reached a huge success. That when he was in Bihar and just about to be jailed, which he finally wasn't because the SP and the collector saw that this man was completely irresistible and would create a rising which would never be stopped, for he was speaking the truth about the exploitation of the indigo workers. While he was waiting for the judgment in the case, he wrote to Principal Rudra, who was a friend of his in Delhi of St. Stephen's College, our people here are sinking. I should deem it a privilege to be imprisoned. If this place, it is said, Bishop Heber said wrongly of Malabar and Ceylon, every prospect pleases, alone is vile. He has come to Bihar. I am crossing decades because I have just about 5 or 7 minutes more before we have a discussion and a talk. Bihar leads to industrial site in Ahmedabad, then to the first non-cooperation movement in 1919, when he comes to Madras, and he says, after Jallianwala Bagh had happened, what do I do? What do I do? And he says when he was staying here in the house of Kasturi Ranga Iyengar, the grandsire of the Hindu family, in the house which was then occupied by not Kasturi Ranga Iyengar but by Rajaji, and Gandhi did not know that Rajaji was his host. He thought Kasturi Ranga Iyengar was his host. He says, early morning which is in this book, twilight condition between sleep and wakefulness, suddenly occurred to me that we should have a nationwide hartal. So the response to Jallianwala Bagh, what was going to become Jallianwala Bagh, started here. The wrongs, the Punjab wrongs as they were called, were still to happen. Culmination was still ahead. But the idea to challenge the Punjab wrongs started in Madras, in the city of Madras. That place is where today the Hotel Chola stands. And a plaque was put there, and Acharya Kripalani came in 1977 to open that plaque. And he said, Acharya Kripalani, when 77 emergency had come, the second independence was on, really. He said, I'm very happy to open this plaque of celebration for the commencement of the first non-cooperation movement. Whatever Gandhi touched turned to gold with the practice of contrary alchemy. This was Kripalani's lesson bit. That original alchemy started in Madras. I passed through several decades to come to a time when the man has tremendous family tensions. Raise family tensions is a normal human phrase which applies to all of us. It applied to him, particularly in the shape of his son Harilal, who had, for very good reasons, decided to become a rebel. And the height of the movement, when Gandhi and Kasturba are traveling in a train in a station called Katni in Madhya Pradesh, a huge crowd stops. Mahatma Gandhi ki jai, Mahatma Gandhi ki jai. Familiar scene, the train. And suddenly one voice is heard. Mata Kasturba ki jai.
Yes.
And then there's Harilal. The old man, shriveled, he comes over a fringe. Doesn't even look at his father. Bah, Karnataka, this is for you. So she is just overcome. I'm Hari. And he says, there's no time. He says in Gujarat, I'm saying in English, there's no time. I'm going to steal you. Don't you get it? This is only for you. And the whistle blows, the train starts. And then, and again, from the distance, Kasturba ki jai. And then she does this. She doesn't say ayyo, but she means to say ayyo. She tells him, we didn't even offer the young boy something to eat. We didn't even ask him if he had had something to eat. Fast forward. 1942, Quit India movement. And they're all arrested. She is also arrested. And she is in prison with him. And she was a very small part. Ba's health taking a turn for the worse. On 3 December, the government asked Ramdas and Devdas to reach Pune. Devdas, accompanied by Ramdas's wife, came. Ba was in need of medical attention. Can't she be released? Because authorities said if she is released and she dies when Gandhi is in jail, he will be called heartless. Her condition worsened on 4 January. She asked me on 2 February with some impatience as to what was happening about the nature cure expert coming to see her. I am at it, I said. We are prisoners, aren't we? On the evening of 22 February, I was called by her. I took over from those who were giving her restful support. I leaned her against my shoulder and tried to give her what comfort I could. Present, some 10 of them stood in front. She moved her arms for fuller comfort. Then, in the twinkling of an eye, with Harilal beside her, Ramdas and Devdas also, the end came. It was, by the Hindu calendar, Shivratri. Messages of condolences came the next day from the Viceroy. It was noticed that none came from Lord Linlithgow, who had jailed him, and none came from Qaid-e-Azam in Jinnah. I will just conclude with the very end, in which I have leaned on Parallel's biography. Vallabhbhai arrived at 4 p.m. with money then. I span as we talked, and then ate my meal served by Abha of goat's milk, raw carrots, vegetables, and 3 oranges. We talked beyond the prayer time of 5 p.m. I did not notice Abha trying to remind me of the time. It was 10 minutes past 5 when I got up. I got into my chappals and walked to the prayer ground. Abha said, "Your watch must have felt neglected." I laughed and said, "When I have timekeepers, why should I look at my watch?" She said, "You would not look at your timekeepers either." I said to her, "I hate being late." Those words are his last full sentence words. In Gujarati, મને મોડું થતું ગમતું નથી. I hate being late. Can only end by saying, that is an ayyo which can hardly be intoned. The whole nation said, ayyo. Shashi.
Thank you, Gopal. So, those were some very, just poignant, particularly the last few ones, very poignant, instances in this compilation. The one with Harilal, as they were passing on the train, as I said, I think it was from Sevagram to Wardha. They were going back to Wardha in the train, and the station as he comes to meet his mother. There's a description there which Gopal, I think, skipped. His tooth are broken, his front tooth are broken. And he apparently got this orange by seeking money for it. He didn't even have money to buy the orange. In other words, he begged and got the orange in order to give his mother, not to his father. And he says, you are what you are because of, you are famous because of Kasturba. I mean, he says that. So there was some plain speaking going on between Gandhi and of course the last moments were fantastic. Now, let me begin at the beginning and ask Gopal this. Why have you said I am an ordinary man? It intrigued me through the book. So I was obviously having an alert eye for something he might have said somewhere. And indeed, I did find one point where he doesn't quite say that, but this is when, the Hunter Commission, after the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, the Hunter Commission, and he is deposing before the Hunter Commission. And the judge, Sir Chimanlal Setalwal, the committee, the committee, the Hunter Committee chairperson, Chimanlal Setalwal asks him, I quote from his book, Mr. Gandhi, you do not consider yourself a perfect satyagrahi yet? So Gandhi says, no. Because that is so, Mr. Gandhi, it is almost impossible for ordinary people to ever hope to be that. Then he says, I do not by any means consider myself to be an extraordinary man. I assume this is what gave you the cue to the title, or was there anything else? Why would you call him an ordinary man when, for instance, someone like Albert Einstein says, generations to come will scarce believe that someone ever in flesh and blood, that such a being as this, ever in flesh and blood, walked upon this earth. Generations to come will scarce believe that such a being as this, ever in flesh and blood, walked upon this earth. And here you are saying, I'm an ordinary man.
That's a very interesting discovery of yours, Sashi, because it corroborates the actual line which occurs on page 393.
Oh, it does. Okay.
This reference, I am an ordinary man, again, is a Madras episode. On the 30th of January, coincidentally, on the 30th of January of 1946, he was in Madras. And I addressed about 1,500 Congress workers for about half an hour from 7:30 p.m. I then asked the gathering how many of them could follow my speech. He was speaking in Hindi. How could the gathering have followed his speech? About 50 people raised their hands. Out of 1,500, only 50 had understood his Hindi speech. I'm surprised that even 50 had understood it. Then he says, noticing Kamaraj, I laughed and asked Kamaraj, you too? And then I asked the gathering to put me questions. The first questioner speaking in English asked me to tell them something about the future. And then Gandhi says, only God can say what is in the future. I am an ordinary man.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Today, I think that's very important. The future of India, the future of the world that is happening, Israel and Gaza, 20,000 killed, including children. What is the future? Gandhi never claimed to be anything more than anyone else. Only God can say what is in the future. I am an ordinary man. This was translated. And I can imagine somebody translating it as, now that was said in Madras. Madras, being crucial to him, was not, to show Madras being crucial to him was not the purpose of this book. But it is, and it was. The book here, which Sashi has read with great care, and I'm most impressed by his care, shows him at his understated best. There is very little drama in this book. By drama, I don't mean fake drama, but I mean the dramatics of his life do not appear in this book because they're his words, and he was not dramatizing what he was doing. And yet, the voltage of what was happening comes through. He is writing with a very conscious effort to make himself appear to be the ordinary man that he thought he was. It is for others to say that he did extraordinary things like Einstein did. You have today slight diversion. Institutions which are called centers of excellence. For an institution to call itself a center of excellence is for me a little iffy. Others can say, my God, are you what a center of excellence? But for me to say, I am a center of excellence. So if he had said, I am an extraordinary man, I am the one and the only, then he will not be the man we are talking about.
One common thread, I think, untouchability, Charkha, of course, and Hindu-Muslim unity. These are very, very strong motives, leitmotifs, as it were, I'm sure in his life as well as in the compilation. On the question of untouchability, I want to raise this issue. Gandhi of course, Ambedkar and Gandhi's differences were also known from the Second Roundtable Conference. Then the demand for separate electorates, which he goes on a fast against. And then the compromise mode is that you will have reservations within the same electorate, to which Ambedkar finally agrees, because Gandhi's fasts are uh, self-denying but threatening for the rest of the world. Those are such potent weapons. But what's interesting is that in terms of untouchability, he's very upset. He doesn't go to temples which don't allow untouchables. In fact, he's upset when Kasturba once goes to a temple because he's invited by the Mahant or the priest, and he's very angry with her because he wouldn't go. He said it's a principle that you don't do, and she didn't know about that. She didn't know that the Mahant had invited Gandhi, and he said he will not go. And then she quietly went the next morning without knowing this, and so on. I raise this because it's part created, issue about caste in the Hindu stuff. And yet Gandhi's framework was the Varnashrama framework in some ways, because it says you've not understood the true Varnashrama. Although it's against untouchability, it's against untouchability totally. He also refers to, he seems to, while he's certainly, a Hindu, there's a sense of a Hindu belief. There's always a cynical, sarcastic, even inimical, I think, reference whenever he talks about Sanatanists. He seems to make a difference when he's talking, and we know who he's talking about when he uses the term Sanatanists. And he's not talking about just Hindus. So do you think that he had this sense of Hinduism being hijacked by the Sanatanists? I mean, if that is what it is, that's one part of the question. And the second part, I'd like you to reflect on this. I remember Gopal many years back came to our college and he was speaking at one of the functions. And he said Gandhi was a very, very well-meaning in terms of untouchability, etc. But at core, this is what Ambedkar asked him as well. Touchability mean I can go to a temple? Gandhi said yes. Will it mean I can go to the sanctum sanctum? Gandhi doesn't respond to that directly. He says, for me, if you enter the temple, you are to do puja. Let's assume that you can whatever it takes to do puja. So Ambedkar was pointing out that if I am a Hindu, I will be as a caste. And that's why should I be a Hindu? And so Gandhi is trying to persuade him that that's not what Hinduism is all about. Hinduism is not about untouchability. And yet he doesn't give a full-fledged, there's no convincing response is my sense, but you're far better than me. I raise this because Gopal says at another point, and I found that quoted here as well. He says, if I am to be born again, I don't believe in rebirth necessarily. Rebirth is rebirth, and if I am to be born again, I would wish to be born a Harijan, untouchable. So that at first hand, I want to engage with that, the deprivation, the slights, the prejudiced society, and so on. And of course, a construct for a Dalit, contemporary Dalit, say Gopal Guru, would be that Gandhi doesn't envisage untouchability. He wants untouchability to disappear, but he seems to know in his heart of hearts that it will never, because if he's born again, it's going to take centuries, and there's still going to be untouchability there. So what is that kind of approach? I just raise this because this was taught to the Bhaktiman.
It's a very important point in logic and in historical determinism. I think what he meant was he wants to be part of human suffering in order to understand it. He wants to be part of it. He doesn't want to minister to it from outside, but he wants to be part of it. And this is where Dr. Ambedkar told him that you can't, because you are not a part of this community. I am, and you can't understand it. And Gandhi said, no, I can, because I feel the suffering. And though I'm not born one, I would like to be born one. So he was trying to internalize the suffering of the Harijans in order to be able to reach the condition of being a Harijan, which he was not. The nearest that he could get was to want to be that. But in point of logic, you're absolutely right. Gandhi's greatest enemy in terms of descriptions of his nature, character, and role is Gandhi himself. Extremely important, interesting, and very irrefutable criticism of Gandhi that can be made is because Gandhi has said what he has said in his own words. He has put down in black and white what he feels, what he has said, what he says, and what he does in ways that exposes him to criticism. And the root of any point that needs to be made and should be made in criticism of him is to be found in Gandhi's own writings. His description of black Africans is jarring. One can't accept it. But it's his description. His best defense came from Nelson Mandela, who said, yes, he has used descriptions of the African community in South Africa, which we will not use today. But as I did not know, Nelson Mandela points this out, that in his time, those were the expressions in current use. And African leaders also use the same expressions. So one would have liked Gandhi to be ahead of his time even more than he was ahead of his times. But then finally he was an ordinary man.
Yes, and unblinking honesty, I mean, it was unblinking in terms of his own honesty. As he says, it's remarkable that to exaggerate it, you almost write self-incriminating stuff, consciously so, to put it, to exaggerate it a bit. But the other part, the first part of my question, perhaps don't slip to your mind. When he talks about Sanatanists, is it just synonymous with Hindus, or is there? I find the context wherever he uses it, it seems to imply there's a barb in it.
The Sanatanists whom he had in mind, particularly visible to him in Travancore, and the Namboodiris who challenged him, they challenged him in ways which are amazingly relevant today. He said, all I want you to do is, please show me the text in which untouchability has been sanctioned. I just want to just show me the text. It exists, it is there. Can I see it? Can you show me the Shastra where untouchability? See, one which is there. If you are able to show it to you, if I am shown a text from the Shastras which sanctions untouchability, I will throw that text away. I will reject that text.
Yes, he does say that. He says, I will not be a Hindu. If Hinduism means untouchability, I would not prefer to be a Hindu. He does say that at another point. About his honesty, I mean, the honesty is so, he's so heterodox in that sense, for his own time. He's such a heterodox person. And he knows his own strengths. For instance, it's he who's describing when he goes to a place, a number of people who come there, tens, thousands, lakhs sometimes, how they receive him, how sometimes bullock carts or horse-drawn carriages are brought, but the horses are removed and people are pulling them like chariots in the temple. You would see that total reverence, and he says that, it's equanimity with even-minded balance. He's writing all this. And it reminds me about, there's no sense of being humble. There's no first, I remember a joke, humorously somebody said, I think it's Bernard Shaw who said, humility is like underwear, good if it's hidden, bad if it's seen. Gandhi's was genuine humility. It was humble. At the same time, someone says, will you be leading this nation? Will you take the lead? He says, yes, I will. When the time comes, I'll lead the people. I will. He had no misgivings about that. He knew what he was. He knew what he could do. I think as Radhakrishnan said, when man is aware of his destiny ends and man takes charge of his own future. So he had that on the one hand. On the other hand, there are beautiful moments when he's seeking inspiration, and suddenly it comes in a flash, like salt. It comes in a flash, as you say. So it's such a you can't slot and you can't really be definitive about this person. Of course, you know what you're talking about. And therefore, I wanted to ask you, with all those frailties, there were some things that he did which had consistency. For instance, he set himself and next perhaps his family, those who are near and dear to him, to far higher and harsher standards than the others. And hence, perhaps the rebellion of Harilal. I think there are instances where he's telling the second son, Manilal, I think he wanted to marry a girl earlier, and he says no. Is it because, I think it was a Muslim girl. I don't know if it's because of that or because he perceived something wrong with that. Then he tells her whom he should marry. He's found a person. She has these arts and crafts. She's well versed in all this. She may be slightly hard of hearing. That doesn't matter. And then he advises him on, I mean, it's the intimate details. He says that you should never overpower her sexually. You should never take your pleasure without her will. And he does it. I mean, standards that he applies to himself, he applies, and I would imagine that those who didn't rebel had a lot of patience in that sense. And it's fascinating that he does this. So would you say that Gandhi, who was what he was, since you are, and perhaps I'm asking you because you're a part of the family, he set such high standards for his own family that perhaps forced some of them to what you might call go the way they did.
His family is the very ordinary family descended from the very ordinary man. Fully aware of what he did in an extraordinary age, with an extraordinary way. And I think nobody really understood it as well as the man who was so different from him. But he was picked by him to be his successor, Jawaharlal Nehru. He was totally different from Gandhi in every respect. Who didn't comment on his fasts, who didn't comment on his experiments with brahmacharya, who disagreed with him on many matters, personal conduct and personal lifestyle, but who saw him as the climate that made the seasons of India's freedom struggle. And who knew that without him, there would be no mass following. And to go back once again, Sashi, to Nelson Mandela, I think the best description of Gandhi, after Nehru's description of Gandhi in his obituary speech, is from Nelson Mandela. He said, Gandhi showed us, South Africans, the way of disciplined mass movement, both discipline and mass. If there was no mass, then to discipline. And if there was no discipline, the mass would be frittered away. So disciplined mass movement is what Gandhi was able to generate in India. And we must remember it started in South Africa with people from this part of India.
Excellent. You mentioned Nehru, of course, and Nehru was certainly his anointed successor. I think he says that, and he says that in as many words, that you will be my heir. He tells Nehru. And yet it's fascinating that Nehru's arch rivals like Subhash Bose will come to Gandhi for advice. And Gandhi sometimes keeps himself at a distance because he wants to give Subhash Bose a fair chance at doing whatever he wants to do, and not allowing anyone to pull his weight to counter that. Although yes, he knows that who is the better person. There are moments when he has conflicts like that with Bose, of course, with Tagore, whom he calls the Gurudev, for instance. His non-cooperation movement, Tagore goes against that, saying, first of all, something which begins with the word non is negative. And then Gandhi points out that the Upanishads, everything begins with neti. not. And therefore it's not irrelevant. Say they have to win kids, so and so on. And the ability to convert someone who is opposed to him, almost invariably to convert them to his point of view or coexist with it without losing an ounce of respect for him. I mean, that's a fascinating quality, which is. I mean, there's nothing in this that is Manichean. In other words, it's not good, bad, black, white. Although one would think in terms of Gandhi, there's the moral compass is very, very complicated in some ways.
His dependence on his wife, his dependence on his colleagues was only part of his larger dependence on this generality of the people of India who just took to him as because for the simple reason that he had nothing from public gaze in his political or his personal life. And I think ultimately it was just very. He was not afraid of two do's. He was not afraid of defeat, and he was not afraid of death. These two days had held no terror for him. And he suffered defeat after defeat as much as he got victory after victory. And as he said, I hate being late. There was this great European philosopher called Lanza. Lanza. He has creatively used that phrase to say, in a dramatic recreation, that he comes and he sees his assassin and he says, "Oh, you are late." Meaning that he himself is and will always be dead. It is the assassin who will be late. It is the assassin who will fall by the landmarks of an ordinary milestone road, whereas he himself strides ahead.
That's fascinating because in your book, there's a portion where Gandhi speaks about, is it his dream or his aspiration? I'm not sure. Where he says he sees himself in a crowd in front of people and says someone with a sword, someone with a dagger, and they are going to kill him. And he says, that is the kind of death I desire. It's fascinating, for someone who is an apostle of non-violence, he sees his own end as violent. I mean, as it turns out, with tremendous prescience, terribly so. So these are some fascinating kind of not contradictions, but that's what makes them so heterodox in the sense that I mentioned it. What the other aspect, since this happened again, it has some kind of resonance today. The other day, there were these youth who jumped into Parliament and some yellow gas was set off, and there were, of course, pandemonium all around briefly. And we know that in these chronicle, some of them were citing that they were following Bhagat Singh's example in British India, where he had gone to central, legislature and they had also assassinated British officials, those who I think were responsible for the death of Rajput Rai as they saw it. Gandhi was, of course, he pleaded for their clemency. He pleaded for clemency, but clemency was not possible. He pleaded for commutation of the sentence. That was not possible. He tried for suspension. I think that at some point Irving said he'll try and look into, but I don't know. But eventually they were hanged, as we know. But Gandhi refers to that. I think this is on his mind, and he keeps weighing down against violence, against that kind of activity, which I think even Nehru said, for instance, Bhagat Singh's that act fired the popular imagination. Subhash Chandra Bose certainly, and yet Gandhi stood his ground. What do you make of that kind of singular vision where you don't make strategic compromises, even if that is, I'm sure it's not that he was not clever or wily, he knew, but when push came to shove, there was something he would not yield to.
I think these two, truth and non-violence, for him, I think, were well ahead of the immediate quotidian aim of the independence of India. And when he said, I do not believe in the cult of the gun, because if we kill the British today, when we are free, will the cult of the gun not turn against us? He was absolutely right. And there's not one of the countries on the south subcontinent of India, South Asia, where the cult of the gun has not taken away the topmost leadership. The topmost leadership. Myanmar, then Burma, Bangladesh, then East Pakistan, Sri Lanka, then Ceylon, Pakistan, and of course India. It didn't require too much foresight to say that, but it required some guts to say it, because it went in a way against popular sentiment, which very rightly saw the great courage and heroism of those who believed in the cult of violence. Though in the case of Bhagat Singh, his last writings in jail show a very different man altogether, both on the subject of violence and on the subject of means and ends. And of course on the subject of secularism. Bhagat Singh is absolutely epic in scale.
When Gandhi was, I remember that when Gandhi, after Gandhi was assassinated, one of those convicted was Godse's brother, who then was Gopalakrishna Godse. And when he was released after he served his life term, we were the ones who interviewed. I was on PTI television. We interviewed him, and at his home in Maharashtra. And the last question that was asked of him was, if you were to live your life all over again, would you do what you did? Would you? And he says, it's a chilling answer. I mean, it's a chilling answer. He says, if I were to live all over again, my life all over again, Gandhi or someone equivalent to Gandhi would have to live his life all over again. And then I, or Godse, would have to do what we did all over again. I mean, this is there is a recorded video interview. So Gandhi, I mean, that was, so we have seen that becoming, that strain in our polity becoming far more acute and dangerous now. But I remember when I did a small documentary on Gandhi on his occasion of his death to be shown when I was in PTAT. We have got this footage from FD at that time, and one of the things where we have him saying, in what context I don't know, maybe in some, it's not a meeting, it's just a group of people and he's saying something where he says in Hindi, "Lete hai naam Ram ka, karte hai kaam Ravan ka." And that strikes me as, I mean, even within the framework of the Hindu allegory, he's able to communicate this. If Gandhi were alive today, I know this is a difficult and probably an unfair question. What did he do? Certainly, we are going through very difficult times in terms of politics, in terms of morality, in terms of truth. We're living in a post-truth world. It's almost as if truth is a convenient tool. And here is someone who lived and died and showed the way of truth, and the truth can conquer. What would be the equivalent value or stance of Gandhism, or Gandhi, what Gandhi stood for? Try and tackle some of these issues that we face today.
It's a very understandable and peaceable question, Sashi. But I think it's a question which has in it a dimension. And it is almost a self-annihilating question. One does not ask what would the Buddha do if he were alive, or what would Christ do, what would Baba Sahib Ambedkar do for that matter. They did in their times, and as the Buddha said of himself, be your own lights, be your own lamps unto yourself. Some say that he said, be your own islands unto yourself. Dvipa, Dvipa. Do not look at what I said for teaching. Test your experience with your own life. I think in Gandhi's case, as I've suggested there, he was moving absorbed towards that was his. He had said, partition of India over my dead body. He had said Hindu Muslim unity is for me the most important thing, along with the abolition of untouchability and the removal of caste distinctions. And he just walked into it. There is this great cartoonist called Morgan, I think he wrote for the Chicago Tribune. He has this fantastic cartoon. Martin Luther King has died. Martin Luther King has died given a few months of saying what he did about Gandhi. Gandhi is already on the cloud in heaven. Martin Luther King comes and joins him. Gandhi looks at him and says, Dr. King, the odd thing about assassins is they think they have killed you. So neither Martin Luther King or Abraham Lincoln or Gandhi can do much more have they been allowed today than what they did. I think in the manner of their going, they have done the maximum that their uniqueness could have enabled them to do.
Thank you very much.
Do we have time for questions? Yeah.
That's entirely optional.
Yes.
Because it's already 7:15. I have taken too long.
No. I think you were brief.
Hello, sir. My name is Ashwin. I'm a student of law, and I have two questions. First is about the ordinary man's introduction to a Western education, and where he was a law student and a lawyer himself. And I just wanted to know how his exposure to Western political thought influenced his coming into the freedom movement, and which makes me go to the broader question as to how did a Western education among most of the freedom fighters of that time influence their decision into fighting for independence? That was the first question, sir. And the second question, let me finish it. Now, as we know, we are in dark ages of, in terms of how we look back into history and into leaders like Nehru and Mahatma Gandhi, what would be a method in which there can be a renaissance of the ideals that we had subscribed to when we became an independent nation, the secularism, constitutionalism, and things like that, that our founding fathers held so dear, and which we have seen to have lost in these 75 years. Do you see that there can be a renaissance in future, if not now? Here are two questions, sir.
So the first question, his education, we could call it Western, we could call it his education in the Inns of Court, was very crucial to him. They shaped him very vitally. And barristering South Africa. South Africa, decolonization. So there was a dialectic. He was Latin. He was criminal. He was an extremely good lawyer. It's entirely because of his education in those 3 years. He takes his exam on day 1, gets his result on day 2, sails on day 3, doesn't waste a single day. His Western education is very important. The ordinary man in him was also the fallible man in him, the man with flaws. He denied his children the Western education that he himself had, with reasons which have never convinced me. absolutely unconvincing. I think if he had given his eldest son the chance to study in London, he would have probably been a very successful lawyer, and he would have also been a very good satyagraha. In fact, he was in South Africa in the satyagraha movement at the lead. It was called Chota Gandhi without any education. If he had been in, I think Gandhi also knew something about his son's nature, and he thought that he probably will be not such a good student as he himself had been. Western education very important, I think. Let him say what he does in Hind Swaraj about Western education. I believe Western education is very important for him. And the Congress Working Committee, in session after session, benefited from Gandhi's knowledge of English, Rajaji's knowledge of English, Sardar Patel's knowledge of practicality, Maulana Azad's knowledge of theology, and Nehru's knowledge of the world. But essentially, English. There was no discussion in the Congress Working Committee which did not proceed on English. Whatever Gandhi may have said about the importance of Hindi, which I grant has its own reason. On the second question, Gandhi, there were propulsions that he gave, but he did not micromanage. The only thing he micromanaged was public funds. Money went through his fingers, and I think any other human being before the independence of India. Afterwards, of course, there has been a different kind of mint that has been working. More money than any. The last penny was accounted for. He did not micromanage. He would not have micromanaged the future of the government at all. He gave it a propulsion. He knew that the Constituent Assembly was doing it broadly on the right track. And on the subject of 50 crores being sent to Pakistan, he didn't say you have no right to do it in technical terms, in political terms, and he just said there's a moral issue involved. That's all. And he went on a fast. He didn't say, I will give up the fast once you release them. And he just went on a fast. And that was enough. He would not have laid down in small print what anyone should have done. He said, for instance, that the ministers in the Congress government should not draw more than such and such an amount of money. But when they did, he didn't interfere.
I agree with you. It's a great honor to listen to and meet you in person. I have a design book and also books together. So recently, I read a book called named Powerful Mahatma by Conrad Dance. You have definitely come across the book. The book from page to page was just diminishing the image of Mahatma itself. And the names that you mentioned, the leaders who worked for independence along with Gandhi, like Ambedkar, Nehru, including Jinnah per se. How an author could think in that angle, like we can portray such a book and diminish it. Because right from our childhood, we've been seeing Gandhi as the icon, the idol, father of the nation. And suddenly one author comes up, says like, was against everybody, Gandhi was against each and everybody, his peers also. So what's the point that one part? Second part is like, continue the same view what I spoke, sir. After 10 years, you can see the image that we during our childhood had on Gandhi, but this generation, are they giving the same view to them? So what happens when they become mature, or next generation, how they view as a Gandhi, which is also having a being as a pure conscious into us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. We wind up.
Yeah, so I think that's that's more like a comment, right? We know that that's the problem. You have a view on that?
Yes.
Well, I think it's true that it's a problem when you begin rewriting history, when you begin producing textbooks which have little to do with history, when you which is what we are seeing here. It's a problem, but a subject for another discussion actually. And I quite agree with what Gopal said in the end that in response to my question that perhaps
Gandhi doesn't mean Congress, for instance. Gandhism was, I think he deliberately kept the difference. And the last point about, I mean, he died, I think, a disappointed man because there were riots and breaking out partition or something he didn't want. And he didn't give the reparations to Pakistan, what was due to them. The argument that was put forth by his own colleagues were that if you gave them this money, they will use it to buy arms to attack us. Logical. But I have just one last question for him because we didn't touch that part of it. Gopal has the unique advantage of being Gandhi's grandson as well as Rajaji's grandson, from the mother's side. Now, Rajaji and Gandhi, of course, there are wonderful, wonderful anecdotes in this. There's one occasion where Rajaji is, I think, on notice was going to be arrested and he's going to be sentenced. And Gandhi said, I hope we get the maximum sentence because I thought that makes him a bigger martyr. But this is a great one. And then of course, Rajaji becomes governor general and so on. And what at which point you see Gandhi, there's a different relationship almost, which he respects. And do you have any memories or anything to share in terms of Rajaji and Gandhi? I mean, that you might like to, the next few minutes, just tell us.
The memories of Gandhi, I was 2 years, no memories of him, which is just what everyone has heard of. They were spiritually inseparable. That's all I would say. Rajaji regarded Gandhi as his master. They were spiritually inseparable. But they were not politically inseparable. And that is a tribute to both those men. But his disciple Rajaji could still have his own views. Most importantly, on the subject of cooperating with the British government during the Second War.
Yeah.
And
Swatantra Party earlier.
And Gandhiji not having any problems with that. Differences of opinion were not only welcome, they were respected and celebrated at that time. Because the main was the same. The values were the same. Differences did not matter. They were Democrats in the highest sense of the term. And the book of faith was truth, the language was honesty, the script was service. That's how I would put it.
Great. So that's the book, and I'll heartily recommend that all of you read it. Thank you very much. Yeah.
It's available here. If anybody wants to buy a copy, it's out.
I'm sorry, we talked about separately on the other way out.
We continue the conversation here. We get it.
Thank you.
Oh,